Kevin Bowen here. Don't forget to listen to The Fan now on 93.5 or 107.5 FM, and check out our latest coverage online at 1075thefan.com.
It is a glorious St. Patrick's Day, so we're back. Another edition of Kevin's Corner. No green beer, sadly, yet. I thought about ripping about 10 Irish car bombs and literally having my stomach expand the size of a refrigerator. Perry, after Notre Dame won last night, the play-in game, if they would have lost, I would have said, that doesn't even count. But then if they won, I'm like, it counts. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Kevin Bowen, Chris Presley, back Kevin's Corner. Chris, good luck to your volunteers today.
Appreciate it.
Here, Cambridge Fieldhouse.
Cambridge Fieldhouse. Thought about potentially going on the second game if we get there against Michigan. But like you said last night, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, a super great game.
What a game.
And for someone like you who has to be up, you obviously have a young daughter.
Yeah.
Your fandom still showing, tweeting out late at night. I was like, because I didn't want to text you because I was like, Kevin's probably asleep.
Oh my gosh, Chris! Stop.
But you were
stop. I mean, I've been waiting for this for 5 years. We made the tournament once in the last 5 years. I was wired. I almost picked up Maddie, and she was sound asleep. She would have probably divorced me on the spot. But
have you ever been to Dayton? It's a great.
I have. Venue. I actually watched Notre Dame get drilled there in the 2013 tournament to a great Iowa State team. But yes, I have been. It is a nice arena, certainly. And now off to San Diego for the Irish. Those of you of our listening audience, the thousands that tune into this podcast, probably 3 of you just cared about that Notre Dame basketball talk. So March Madness is here for the Colts. Yannick Ngakoue, huge trade.
Yep.
Yesterday, Thursday morning, late Thursday morning, we are recording this. So but plan accordingly for breaking news, right, Chris? Because that's what we had last week.
So just a quick backstory. I know we got a lot to get to. We're up against it. You told me we were going to move the podcast till Thursday. Me knowing you, me knowing that you have sources, I started trying to read the tea leaves, and I'm like, does Kevin know something? Are we finally going to break news after it happens instead of beforehand? People started DMing me. Everyone was wondering. I put out a tweet saying, literally, I know nothing. Kevin's a busy guy. Has a morning show, biggest writer on our website, has a young daughter, has a lot going on. So that's probably why it was pushed back until today.
Well, the Colts weren't really doing a whole lot.
Yeah, the Colts weren't, yeah.
And, I had a feeling something would happen on Wednesday. This trade, not necessarily what I was thinking. So we'll unpack so far where we're at. About 4 re-signings, Brandon Facyson corner, and then the Ngakoue trade, and then Twitter questions as always. Let's begin with Yannick Ngakoue.
Right.
Chris, from the standpoint of he doesn't go against the Colts next year, it's a win. 8.5 career sacks against the Colts, 3 more than any other team for him in the league. I am a huge, huge fan of this move, and I want to make it really clear why. He's proved it. He's available week in and week out, consistent, and young-ish. 4 things, Chris. He's proven it. He's healthy. He's done it on an annual basis, and he's not 33. It is so rare at edge rusher. Look at the Colts over the last decade and a half. You literally have to go back to Robert Mathis to find the last proven edge rusher in his mid-20s to put on a Colts uniform. And it is vital that now you don't put piano weight on Kwity Paye and Dayo Odengbo,
right,
like you did last year, and saying, oh, yeah, Justin Houston and Danico Autry are gone, but good news, we've got more young rushers that we're going to put immense pressure on them. That position, man, you got to have guys that have proven it. The stat that I just think is so impressive with Ngakoue, entered the league in 2016, Chris. Since then, 6 seasons, 8 sacks or more in every single season. How many guys in the NFL you think have done that?
3. 2 or 3.
Other player, and that other player is Aaron Donald.
As I was going to say, I knew Donald had to be one of them.
Again, 6 straight years of 8 sacks, then 12, then 9.5, then 8, then 8, 10 this past season with Gus Bradley. It's not going to be 16, 18 sacks. He's not going to be a first-team All-Pro. But if you look at his resume, missed 2 games in 6 seasons, health-wise, and you can pencil in 15 games and 9.5 sacks, you have all of a sudden taken a football team that was in the basement in the NFL and striking fear into opposing offense of like, man, we got to be worried about that Colts edge rusher this week. Colts haven't had that in years. Years. Now what does that do? Does that make a interior lineman, have to kind of, oh, wow, what about Ngakoue out there? I can't, put everything on Buckner on this snap. Where does the one-on-ones go? For all those reasons, I'm a big fan of it. You got to remember his defensive coordinator is Gus Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
Gus don't want to blitz. You don't want to blitz, you better have some alphas up front. You better have some D-A-W-G-S. That spelling of dogs. Not D-O-G like Rudy Bowen. I had a dog named Rudy growing up. I just called Rosie Rudy. Probably not the last time I'll do it. Rosie, dog, he loves dog. D-A-W-G, dog.
Right.
You just need it. You need people that are going to win one-on-one. And now I think you have something where rundowns, Chris, Ngakoue and Kwity Paye as your ends. Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner as your tackles. Mm-hmm. On pass downs, boom, Stewart comes off the field, Dayo Dengbo comes on the field, Tyquan Lewis comes on the field. Whatever you want to do there. You're facing Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson next year. You got to have a 4-man rush that can give you something there. You scheming up a pass rush, it just sounds good. It sounds good, but it ain't reality. You can't scheme it up. Look at the Super Bowl. That's right. Not Aaron Donald winning a scheme to ice the game. It's Aaron Donald winning one-on-one.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, Chris, yes, you would have signed him in free agency last year. And we said it on this podcast I guarantee you, a year ago this week, we said, where the hell was the pass rush move? You had a lot of them hit the market last year, and Ngakoue was one of them. So that means you wouldn't be giving up Rock Ya-Sin. But, again, that's not the reality of the situation. I know Rock came on for you a little bit last year. Corner's a need, certainly, but I'd rather have a pass rusher than a corner.
Yeah.
If you're going to make me pick one or the other, that's where I'm going on that. So.
And with the state of the NFL, like you've said before, and everyone that watches the NFL knows, it is a passing league, so you got to get to the quarterback first, and that can sometimes blanket the secondary. We traded Rock for him, straight up, 1-1. Like you said, let's talk about Facyson because he is a long corner that everyone says Chris Ballard he's a proponent of lengthy corners. What do you think about that signing?
Yeah, I think it's an important one all of a sudden. And I know some people had questions about Yannick Ngakoue playing for 5 teams now in 6 years. We had a Twitter question on that, if I'm not mistaken. So I think we'll get to that in Twitter questions. The contract of Facyson indicates to me that he could be a starter. He hasn't really done that in his career besides last year. Mostly special teams guy and just kind of a, sub-package corner. The coverage stats were pretty notable, I thought, just from got his hands on a lot of balls. Completion percentage was pretty low. Obviously, are the Colts listening to Gus Bradley's voice or what? Ngakoue and then Facyson. Facyson undrafted out of Virginia Tech, goes to Chargers with Gus Bradley 2018. Chargers. Boom, Gus Bradley leaves to go to the Raiders. Last October, Facyson joins him there. And now here he is. So he actually was the guy that had kind of a weird anecdote. He was the guy that had the coverage on Devin Funchess when Funchess broke his collarbone back in week 1 of that season when they played the Chargers out in that soccer stadium. So, again, long corner. You lose Rock. I'm curious, are you going to play more man? It's never really been a Bradley thing. Did that make Rock a little bit more expendable? Again, I don't think so, but something that popped into my head. Corner, you need to go do something else. So I don't – Facyson, Kenny Moore, Isaiah Rodgers, not the end of the world, but I would want another one there. And there's still a lot in free agency that you can go out and get there. So all of a sudden with this Rock news,
right,
corner now a little bit more on the need list and Facyson pretty darn important.
So do you think with today's NFL, cornerback, obviously we said is important, but with a defensive coordinator coming in, is that one of the vital points of I at least just want to know, even if, let's say Facyson doesn't do great, you just want to be in line with someone on the back end. So Gus Bradley bringing in a guy that he knows.
Yeah, clearly Gus is like this guy, just like he's like Ngakoue. I mean, Gus was with Jacksonville. He was a head coach when they drafted Ngakoue in the third round in 2016. So, yeah, and I like the Colts are willing to listen to the guy. You've heard some of these defensive interviews so far, and some of these guys that they've re-signed, I think there was an open-mindedness, and I've mentioned this when Gus Bradley was hired, of like just a new message, new eyes. All these systems are new. That's, I think, important. Sure, there's going to be ups and downs in a new system and all that, but you had reached a ceiling, I think, of the old defense. Now you get new blood, new bodies, new coaches, things like that. Can you get higher?
Yeah.
I think that's what you like there.
And, again, we haven't made a ton of news. We joked about it earlier. We always joke about it. Hopefully, I mean, it's 10:30 a.m. here on the East Coast.
There's going to be news.
So there's going to be news at some point. But right now, the in-house signings, what do you...
Come back and record an emergency pod later.
Yeah. What are you thinking about the in-house signings that we've made?
Yeah, so Tyquan Lewis makes sense to me. Jack Mewhort type deal, a rotational, prove it. Got to prove his health. Chris, he's played double-digit games once in 4 years. But he was really coming on for you last year. That was a serious knee injury, though, so you'll watch that. Mo Alley-Cox, again, makes sense. Even if Mo Alley-Cox never takes another step forward, Chris, he still is a serviceable player for you and a needed player for you. I view tight end as a major need still in this offseason. Matt Pryor on the O-line, I like it. The contract, to me, it looks a little bit of like, wow, is he really going to be the left tackle? I don't like if he's the left tackle. And you guys have heard me say this for years now. It is amazing to me how horrific of a job Chris Ballard has done in even sniffing the tackle position with the draft pick or life when Anthony Costanzo flirted with retirement, and then Eric Fisher and his Achilles injury. So we'll see what happens there at tackle. But at the minimum, Pryor is your 6-0 lineman. Good. The other re-signings there, Franklin, sure. Great leader, special teams captain. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense there. So Chris Reed, Michael Badgley, George Odom, those are guys that I'd be looking to still bring back. Al-Qadim Muhammad probably wants a bigger role elsewhere. Could he go to Chicago, team up with Eberflus? T.Y. Hilton, Zach Pascal, both free agents. I get it. But at the same time, like, you are going to have to find some wideouts at some point. Obviously, you want to upgrade, and I've been clamoring for that. There are some wideouts definitely still out there. But if anything, it's just new faces alongside Michael Pittman this year. So yeah. I think that's everybody. Mark Lewinsky's moved on with the Giants. Good for him. But Ballard's MO. He lets the in-house free agents hit the open market and still will bring them back. I would have liked to have seen more activity in the first few days. I think I'm preaching to the choir there. You guys know how I feel. I can hear Ballard right now saying, you're spending A money to get B players. Well, when you've spent B money to get C players, like you've done, you've seen what's happened. Now, the Ngakoue move I love, but again, we're going to grade each and every decision on a very individual basis because that's how you have to operate. The general approach to free agency and missing some of these names, I do think is an issue so far. Again, still a good amount of names out there, but if you look at any kind of top 100 free agent list, it's probably about half been chewed up so far. And the Colts are, 40-ish million in cap space. Obviously, the quarterback domino to fall as well.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The domino of the quarterback is the main thing that's going to happen. So,
and I guess we're waiting for Deshaun Watson, right?
I think that's the biggest one. Once that falls.
New Orleans seems to have some momentum as of Thursday morning. Does that put Winston on the open market? What about his ACL? How would that impact things for the Colts? So, yeah, I'm sure we got some quarterback-centric questions and Twitter questions. So let's just hop into that.
Yeah, let's jump in. This one comes from T. Hey, Kevin, big fan of the pod from Toronto, Canada.
Nice. Always wanted to go to Toronto.
It's a great city. I've never been.
Oh.
But a buddy of mine lives in Buffalo. Obviously, and I got to get the tattoo. I know.
Yeah, we've been waiting on that, man.
But Toronto just seems like basically kind of like the New York City of Canada, and it just looks beautiful. Anyway, with Ngakoue and the Facyson trade, why did we not go after or show interest in Chandler Jones? And were the Colts not having a solid answer for the QB sway big-ticket free agents from signing from Indy?
Yeah, I think that last point's fair. I still think money talks, but if it gets close, you're going to have some hesitancy. I think the Colts were after Chandler Jones. Yeah, I think Chandler Jones had a decision to make himself. So, he joins the Raiders, and then the Colts, kudos to Chris Ballard for having a quick plan to operate and get a guy like Yannick Ngakoue. And a lot of it's probably flavor. Again, Jones, certainly the better player. Also older. Mm-hmm. I would say a little bit more injuries than Yannick Ngakoue. He's been incredibly healthy. And again, Chris, that's the key, man. I made this analogy on our morning show. You know who's led the NBA in three-pointers made the last 3 years?
Last 3 years. It's got to be Steph, right?
My first guess would be Steph. My second guess would probably be Damian Lillard. It's Buddy Hield.
Really?
Why? Because Buddy Hield has missed, barely any games over the last 3 years. It's availability. In a vacuum, Chris, who's the better basketball player, Malcolm Brogdon or Buddy Hield? Probably Brogdon.
Brogdon would be the guess.
But
yes.
again, you just can't rely on him to stay healthy. Like Kamoko Toure or Al-Qadim Muhammad. Kamoko Toure's shown more individual flash, but Al-Qadim Muhammad's been available.
Right, yeah.
Again, the greatest abilities, availability. I know it sounds corny, and I probably sound
but
like
it's
a
true.
grandpa, but it's true. And that's
right.
what Ngakoue has given the respective teams throughout his career. Now, the 5 teams in 6 years, certainly that's notable. I mean, Jacksonville kind of blew it up. Zach Kiefer we had on today, he said there were some coaching issues in Baltimore. He didn't love how he was used. I think he was a free agent there, so he got they decided for him, the Raiders. And then he's, really just kind of followed Gus Bradley around. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of it.
This one comes from Clayton. Chris Ballard has a reputation of being frugal when it comes to cap room and signing for free agents. Some attributes to wanting to build the culture of the locker room. Do you think being the extremely picky on free agents, he can ruin that culture? Guys like Kenny Moore, Darius Leonard, Buckner, they're trying to win. They've obviously been vocal on social media. By not making moves, can Chris Ballard have a team, quote unquote, turn against him?
Yeah, it's a good question, Clayton. Turn against him seems to be kind of a aggressive turn. I mean, phrase, I guess. Turning against a GM. I don't know. It just sounds a little far-fetched for me. Having said that, I think players, while they're being a little jokeful about it, I think they are, on edge a little bit. As they should. I mean, it's okay to be on edge. It's okay to be a little testy. I think that's fine. They're curious just as much as we are of man, I wonder what they're going to do. It's so much unknown this time of year. One other thing I want to mention on Ngakoue, Chris, and it's kind of related to this question. I think he brings a little bit of Autry edginess. Not like you line up on the edge.
Yeah.
Edginess to that defense, which I think is needed. A little bit of that, I've talked about it before. A little bit of a guy that, you're going to have to corral him at times, but other times, again, he'll be that dog for you. I know he's not terrific against the run, but that is something that I think is needed. Someone mentioned to me, I forget who it was. Someone tweeted at me, do you think Chris Ballard is better reacting than he is being proactive? And I do think there is some validity to that, albeit I think it's easier as a human being, and I don't know, maybe I'm speaking for myself, to be reactive versus proactive, In that position that Chris is in, you need to do both very well. Kevin Pritchard would probably qualify as someone that is reactive, a little bit better than proactive. Drafts being proactive, trades being reactive. So I do think that's something that you bring up a point, Clayton, that kind of sparked that other idea for me.
That's actually a really good. I never thought about that. That is a very good, and like you said, you have to toe the line as a GM of proactive versus reactive.
And obviously proactive poorly would be left tackle, would be a golden example of it. Quarterback, that would be, I think, an example of it as well.
Next question comes from Juan. Hey, Kevin, hope you're doing great.
Juan, thank you. Hope you are well.
barring some crazy moves today or tomorrow, do you think Jim Irsay will be okay with silently sitting back and watching Chris Ballard do nothing in free agency as usual, which we kind of just touched on proactive or reactive? Thanks as always. Looking forward to today's podcast. Have a great day. From Juan,
same to you. It's interesting. Jim Irsay's kind of had this like big view as patience with this duo. I keep on coming back to that end of the season in Jacksonville. What was the change? Clearly Wentz. I think Reich wanted Wentz back. It's my opinion. Ballard, well, let's go with Irsay. Irsay wanted him gone. And I think Ballard sided a little bit more with Irsay than he did with Reich, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But what else has changed? Clearly he wasn't demanding spending more early in free agency. I mean, we're approaching, 72 hours here?
But that's where people are going to all chips in.
And again, I tried to, I think I did this. I don't know. Maybe it didn't come across. I get what all chips in sounds like. But, first from a draft pick standpoint, you don't have the chips that you would want to Russell Wilson it or, whatever, entertain something along those lines. Irsay, his PR team probably regrets that, just how that sounded. Not the plane engine in the background and that it kind of muffled what he sounded like, but the actual word and phrase. So, put the all chips in analogy to the side for a second, Chris, because, whatever. It's cliche, it's catchy, it's whatever. Frankly, it's just a stubbornness to continue to do what you've always done. I mean, you started, how long have you been doing the Network Indiana stuff?
September.
So you've been doing that for 9 months. The blueprint or approach you walked into the Network Indiana thing with, you'd probably have a little bit of a different blueprint approach to it 9 months later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all jobs.
Because you have to always evolve and pivot.
Yeah, you have to. And I just don't think the philosophy has evolved to where you need it to. Certainly there are examples of the other end of the spectrum of this, but the Field Yates comment of the Field Yates discovery of the stat of the last 6 years, the top spender in free agency has improved their win total by at least 3 games over the last 6 years. We have such a negative stereotype against free agency. Hey, give it a try. When Chris is swung in free agency, he's hit some singles, doubles, whatever. It's just you haven't swung enough, especially early on. So, again, that's where I disagree with things.
And I think that's where a lot of the Colts fans right now, especially knowing where our cap is, we're hoping that some free agency can be there.
Yeah.
Question from Gary, or let's go with Rob first. Rob, sounds like the Browns might be onto Watson, as we talked about a little bit earlier in terms of that domino piece. If they indeed get him, does Baker Mayfield become an option for the Colts? Would you rather have him or Jimmy Garoppolo? And that's going to be a big question that a lot of people are going to ask.
Yeah, who's healthier, Chris? Aren't they both dealing with their shoulder issues?
Yeah.
I guess Jimmy. Boy, if Deshaun Watson goes to Cleveland, those divisions with quarterbacks, the AFC West and the AFC North, holy shnikes. Jimmy G, slight improvement. I think he hits on a couple key metrics a little bit better than Carson Wentz did and that are important to the Colts. I think he'd help you a little bit more from a leadership standpoint and a respect. But, Chris, there's the giant question of health. Right throwing shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Go back and look at Frank Reich and Chris Ballard comments earlier this offseason. Neither of them have been more on the same page and more passionate about a topic than the fact that we need to do OTAs. We need to have healthy off seasons. We need to participate in training camp. Those things. So that's where I think of, okay, Garoppolo, when's he throwing? They say hope is the start of training camp. So we've heard that phrase before here in Indy. Not to throw down another shot of Jameson on the St. Patrick's Day, but, and then Baker, I don't know if it's as serious, but still, I think that's a question you would have as well. And then when Cleveland is saying we want an adult at quarterback, boy, don't think Baker Mayfield's putting that on his LinkedIn resume. So every single quarterback you're going to shrug your shoulders at to some degree that's available right now. Carr would probably be the one that you might not. but all the others you are. And I'm probably a little bit more anti-Garoppolo than I think some of my colleagues, but I just look at it as a health issue. I look at it as his numbers in the playoffs very much dipped compared to the regular season. Debo and George Kittle aren't here. And like Kyle Shanahan is telling you what I think the Colts will have to admit at some point with Garoppolo. Kyle Shanahan literally has said he's not good enough. He's not good enough. Even with they have a decent run game. Yeah. San Francisco. They don't have Taylor, but they got a decent run game. Even with Kittle, even with Samuel, even with my offensive mind, we felt like we needed to take a big risk. It was a big risk, trading up for Trey Lance. Because Garoppolo just can't get it done. Yeah. So that would be my concern of gosh, all right, 2023, we're going to have the same question that we have now with that. Again, none of these QBs are going to satisfy what people want in the here and now. But that's why the miss on Wentz was so immense. It put you in a situation to now you're in an offseason where the quarterback situation is just, ugh. Just, ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Like I've said before, I have a brother who's a Buffalo Bills fan, a brother-in-law who's season ticket holder for Tampa, another brother who's a 49er fan. So we're all along all the spectrums, and
yeah, you got it covered there.
We text about football all the time, and they're basically like, "So you're just gonna get a bridge quarterback?" Like that's just seems like what it is for right now, but
where it is.
We'll see. This one comes from Gary. After watching with the next pick stuff, I'm starting to believe that Chris Ballard has great scouts, and he is so objectively. Yes, he's making the final call, but I don't know if there's anything special about his decision making. As a fan, which I am allowed to be, this doesn't feel like the all chips in of the offseason. This feels like bull chips. On the other end of the spectrum is your pod, which is ranking objectively and downright the best Colts podcast. Thank you, and Chris.
Well, I appreciate that, Gary. Thank you for being so loyal and for those kind words. We kind of talked about the all chips in phrase a little bit earlier. I'll say this, Chris. I was texting back and forth with, I would say, an important member of the Colts organization. And, I'd say it was just kind of a healthy discussion on quarterback. And, basically I said to this person what I say on this podcast, to be frank, of as soon as Andrew Luck retired before the start of the 2019 season, every single offseason in my mind, Chris, the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 goal on your offseason checklist has got to be all of our meetings this week are going to revolve quarterback. Who's available? What can we give up? Who do we like? Who do we not like? Plan A through Z. Can we find the next quarterback? And instead, the Colts have said, how many Band-Aids do we have left? Are there more Band-Aids in that drawer? Well, Carson Wentz ended up being like kind of a wet Band-Aid. It just, at some point, I said to this person, when you're drafting 13 overall, like you did the year after Luck hung it up, when you're drafting 21 overall, and in both of those draft classes, you had, 8 quarterbacks, I want to say, drafted ahead of you. That's when you look at Kansas City. You look at Buffalo. You look at Baltimore. I'm not talking about Joe Burrow going 1 overall. Maybe the Chargers even with Herb. You look at these teams that have found their quarterbacks through the drafts, oftentimes trading up. And again, at some point, you have just got to do that. And, I don't know. I feel like at times, I don't know. I won't get into much more of the conversation than that. But you guys, again, have heard me present the stance of team draft. And I just feel like the organization's afraid. Afraid to go that route. It's scary. It's daunting. But, Chris, when you pass in 2020. Was it 2019? Luck retired in 2019, right?
I mean, anywhere from 2019 to 2022 has all been a blur.
Yeah,
so.
I'm trying to put the drafts together. I guess the 2020 draft, you had 13 overall. 2021 draft, you had 21 overall.
Mm-hmm.
Those were pretty fertile quarterback years. You could throw Stafford into it. as well as an offseason candidate. Well, now, Chris, you're sitting here in 2022, and it is, the Colts had opportunities to shop at, Von Maur. Hopefully our older listening audience, I don't know, what would be the younger one? Lululemon?
Probably, yeah.
And instead, they're in an offseason now where you're shopping at, Walmart, Target, whatever. I'm a big Old Navy fan, but I know that's not,
For local people, you went from Keystone at the Crossing to Castleton.
Yeah, something along those lines. You could make the argument that not even Castleton, to be honest with you, more garage sale like with some of these quarterback options that are out there. So again, that was my disagreement. I think it's fair to say. I thought it was a healthy argument. We both were listening to both sides of it, but when you kick the can down and believe in Band-Aids, I don't think you're ever going to get out of it, and that's where the Colts are at right now.
Well, Mitch has a question about that. So let's talk about if we have another Band-Aid, if we go with Sam Ehlinger, do you put all your chips to the table, or do you go after a lot of free agencies to try and build around him?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, certainly. Now, the Ehlinger thing, we can get into Ehlinger a little bit more down the road. I just think there's such a defined ceiling with him. There was a reason 200 picks went before Ehlinger went, He wasn't great in the preseason this year, and he wasn't even game planned for, or game planned against. So I think Ehlinger can be a serviceable, nice backup, but I think by no means should it just be, all right, Ehlinger's the starter. No, go draft one. Give somebody a little bit more of the raw traits to develop.
Sticking with quarterbacks, Caleb wants to know about Chris Ballard's interest in Deshaun Watson. Do you think he knew that Houston would decline? Is he playing 4D chess to try and see what the asking price would be? And also, does this show that we had no backup plan after trading Carson Wentz? Caleb's very frustrated.
Well, Caleb, they couldn't have had a plan that – every plan, Chris, that they had to involve outside people agreeing to their plan. A free agent agreeing, a team willing to trade. Nothing was ready-made. Obviously, the draft situation is, speaks for itself when you're drafting now 42 overall. As far as the Watson call, I don't have a lot of clarity on that. With Schefter and his reporting, you never know how sources are trying to get that info out there. I'll say this, Chris. If I were the GM and I'm running things, I'm calling everybody. Because at the bare minimum, I want intel.
Yeah, might as well kick tires on anything.
Who's available? You talk to me. I want to play poker to the best. I want to gather all the information. You're going to have to sift through a lot of BS, certainly. But again, I'm calling everybody. So I don't make a whole lot of it with the call. I still stand by that. I don't think the Irsay daughters would have signed off on it. And clearly Houston has mentioned, in order to have a meeting with Watson, you would have had to have a trade package that they checked off. Well, again, are the Colts presenting that? I mean, where's that first-round pick?
Next question comes from Brent. Do you think the Colts and the AFC quarterback slate will be determined by all chips in, meaning tanking for the 2023 quarterback selection? He's discouraged right now, finally got to a point where he could afford season tickets the last few years, and he doesn't know if he's going to do so with a team being mediocre. Leaving the stadium after losses suck.
Well, yes, and I'm hearing more and more of this, Brent. I've had people text me, message me if it's getting hard to continue to be a fan, this and that. I get the frustration. Mm-hmm. As far as the suck for Stroud or yo-yo for Young, I don't even know if that makes sense. Walk the dog maybe with a yo-yo. I don't even know what the hashtags would be. Chris, you can't tank in the NFL. I mean, let's say you tank and all of a sudden you're drafting third and Stroud and Young go 1 and 2 and you're sitting there at third and you're screwed. So, yeah, Brent, I hear you out, but I just think it's super difficult. You got to build the ammo and then make the trade up.
Yeah. I mean, I did tweet the other day, and again, I'm emotional like most of our podcast listeners with just a train of tanks going through. It's like because we didn't make any moves right away.
Right. And I get it, and I've talked about the Pacers a lot, but again, it's just really difficult to do that in the NFL. And let's be honest, this team is good enough I mean, they're not 3-4 wins, even with Ellinger. And in my opinion, I think you'd win 6-ish, something like that.
Yeah. All right, Coda wants to know, obviously, he wanted an emergency podcast.
Yeah, you got it, Coda. You got it.
He wants someone to explain to him, which would be you, Kevin, why we aren't signing a single player. Doesn't understand the point of having the cap space and not trying to go get better.
See, it's that last part, Chris. Not getting better. That's where I disagree with Ballard's view on free agency. It is the one time early in free agency to truly improve some parts of your football team without, again, patchwork. Like a new tire, not just a patch tire. That's what the first couple of days in free agency particularly offer. So that's where I agree with Coda.
Yeah. This one comes from Cameron. If Chris Ballard's free agency is business as usual, quote unquote, budget spending and the depth pieces that we need in free agency, should his seat be very hot? And I know we've talked about this on multiple podcasts. You can't be this patient forever when you have to start paying the younger guys.
This is probably just a stupid Notre Dame analogy that you guys will hate, but Mike Bray's been at Notre Dame, Chris, for 2 decades now. One of the things that he's had more than anything has been continuity with his assistants. He has an entirely new assistant coaching staff this year. I mean, you follow college sports enough. That's pretty drastic to have an entirely new assistant coaching staff. They were awful last year. Couldn't guard anybody, and they still can't really guard anybody. But they felt like you need to make a drastic change. It's helped on the recruiting front. They've played better defense as well. But again, what I'm getting at is there comes a point in time, Chris, of what you've done, and even Bray at Notre Dame, where he's had such great success and is minimal pressure on him to deliver. He even got to a point where it's like, no, I don't want to retire. I'm willing to cut ties with some people that he's had long relationships with, bring in fresh minds, fresh thinking, and it has worked to a degree. I mean, they've gotten to a point where earlier in the year, I didn't think it was possible that they would get there. Just feels like Ballard's unwilling to change. And that's
you have to, like you even said, you've talked about it multiple times, even going to the Notre Dame football front, Brian Kelly.
Right.
There's a lot of times where you have to make a move and cut ties with someone.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's go rapid fire with these last ones.
Rapid fire. Hi, Kevin. This comes from Nate, Zach, and Walter, kind of touching on the same thing. Want to know about the quarterback swings and the fences. Trying to get Taron Armstead, obviously, which was a big name.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts there?
Armstead, Chris, I'm talking with Joel Erickson, who covered him with the Saints. He's like, dude, this dude's more injured than Eric Fisher. So I get he's a better player, but, wouldn't you be in kind of a similar boat at left tackle? So the whole Fisher move, I mean, that's cost you at left tackle where now you're scrambling again.
From Luke, what would you do to see Deshaun Watson, Jonathan Taylor, and Naheem Hines in the backfield together? Love the podcast.
Thank you, Luke. I mean, Watson is a freaking unbelievable talent. I mean, again, putting the off-the-field stuff to the side because I think it's pretty complex. I think that would take about an hour to sift through. I mean, Colts fans, you don't want Watson in the AFC.
No.
Unless he's on your team.
That's right. Gary wants to know, so wait, we could have had Amari Cooper for a 5th and a 6th. What am I missing?
Yeah, Gary, I don't get that one. Chris, look at the list of free agents right now. A lot of them are hurt. I feel like the Colts do not manipulate the cap in ways that a lot of other teams do as well. Mm-hmm. That's something I'd like to see kind of explored a little bit. And I keep on coming back to support your quarterback. Cooper's really similar to Yannick Ngakoue in that he's been very available and annual sort of production there. Yep. So, again, I just the Cooper thing, boy, I would have given a 3rd or a 4th.
All right, we got 4 more. This one comes from Randall. Read a piece where the Colts, where do we go from here? Bit harsh on Jameis Winston. Also wants to know your thoughts about his injury last year. Thinks he could be better for us making the playoffs. He really likes Ritter from Cincinnati. Also Malik Willis as well. What are their downsides?
Yeah, I'm not like anti-Winston. I think I've said it before. So many people want to see just game manager now for the Colts at quarterback. I'm like, no. You still need a swing. You still need a swing. Like, remember where you were without Phillip Rivers or after Phillip Rivers. Like, you felt like Rivers had the defined ceiling. Winston would help you, I think, swing. Now, obviously, he can swing and miss, but that's where I am intrigued. But the ACL, I mean, again, the offseason work, I think that's a major, major question.
Well, glad you said that word, Kevin. Swing is a big one here from Tim. Swing in the draft. Listen to the podcast last week. Appreciate your thoughts and the efforts. Talk about swinging in the draft when it comes to what happened with Jacob Eason. What about Sam Ehlinger, especially in this draft? Who do the Colts pick?
Well, Tim, I guess to go to my golf outing analogy that I've used before, Chris, the swing of Sam Ehlinger, that's a swing with like a persimmon 3-iron you got out of your dad's basement. The old hickory shaft. The swing of Eason, you're probably using your hybrid to get the ball in the fairway. First and second round picks, you need to swing with the driver.
Yeah.
Swinging with pick 122 or 200 and wherever Ehlinger was is different than swinging with 25 overall or 32 overall.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm getting at with, again, taking a swing.
Yeah. Question from Zach. Kevin, with the Carson Wentz trade, is this a 2-year trade in the eyes of Chris Ballard? What I mean by that is, do we open up cap space and sign a mediocre quarterback this season, and on the other high end of free agency, use draft capital for non-quarterback related needs? Then in the next draft, the first round, do you finally go, or second round, pick up a franchise quarterback?
I just don't want to let an offseason go by without trying to do something there. So, again, I know this year it might be a little riskier in terms of the success rate. It doesn't look great on paper, but, again, I still think you can't waste an entire offseason.
Last question comes from Travis. He says, quote, Colts more disappointed in the man than his play, end quote. To those words, can you give any more detail? Many take this as the vax stance, but there was also other vocal leaders on the team that were not vaxxed.
Travis, I totally get it. And I'm trying to explain Jim Irsay's thinking with this answer. First off, quarterback means more than other positions, just to be frank. I think it was not just the vaccine. I think there was a stubbornness to accept coaching. You got to remember, Chris, his Eagles days are a long time ago with Frank Reich. A lot has happened since then with Wentz. Frank Reich, I think, thought he had matured, thought he had grown a little bit. The thing about Carson, too, is he was always kind of the big man on campus. Adversity never really hit him until after Frank left Philly. Well, how do you react to that?
Yeah.
Adversity. I just think Frank was too loyal. And I get it. Like human beings, we are attracted to people we have prior connections with. It's natural human instinct. But I think Frank should have looked at Doug Peterson's actions, and that should have said enough to him. A guy he trusts a lot in Doug Peterson as well. You look at some of these quarterbacks, right? Like Patrick Mahomes didn't have the spoon-fed college career. Peyton Manning, what? They go 6-10 his fourth year in the NFL. How you react to adversity, I think, is a huge, huge element of it. So I think, again, stubbornness is the word I would use with Wentz. And I think when, just the smartest guy in the room sort of feel to it.
It's fair. All right, that wraps up Twitter questions. Anything else you got to add before the weekend? I know it's obviously St. Patty's Day, March Madness, a lot of good football to watch. What can the Colts fans hopefully look for once we end this podcast?
Yeah, well, I just drink some more green beer. No, in all seriousness, you got to think some quarterback domino will fall. They still got money in free agency, and they still got a lot of big needs. We'll kind of break down some of the open starting jobs now on next week's pod. Obviously, we'll see how things react. Why we had a later pod, we were waiting for news. Same thing next week. It'll kind of be up in the air. We'll wait for some news cycle to happen before we come at it with a pod. All right, Chris Preston, good luck to your Vols.
Appreciate it.
Everybody have a great March Madness, St. Patrick's Day, all of that. Enjoy this time of year. Hopefully it's nice weather wherever you're at. Thank you for tuning in to Kevin's Corner, and we'll talk to you next week. This has been Kevin Bowen. Thank you for listening to another edition of Kevin's Corner. If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher for the best Colts and Pacers coverage.